Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jennifer. I'm so happy to have you back for chapters 4 and 5 of Child Bride by Suzanne Finstad. This is the untold story of Priscilla Beaulieu Presley. Now in chapter 3, that was called Little Girl Lost, we talked about Priscilla's difficult early childhood. And in that chapter, I don't know about you guys, but when I was reading it, the sense of sadness and loneliness that Priscilla felt throughout her early childhood just was palpable. And as you've seen, and as I've discussed for chapters 1, 2, and 3, I really do feel that that sense of isolation and really desolation had a lot to do with the fact that her mother, Anne, and her stepfather, Paul Beaulieu, kept the identity of her birth father a secret from her for over a decade. And Priscilla, as a result, as we talked about in chapter 3, just always felt sad, always felt this feeling as if she didn't belong, but she couldn't quite put her finger on why. She felt like she didn't look like her father at all. She felt like she didn't look like any of her half siblings. There were always secrets. There were always whispers going on in the household that she couldn't quite understand, make sense of. And it was intolerable in a lot of ways. So she talked about how she just basically built her early childhood on fantasy, on just, wishing she was a different girl, wishing she had a handsome prince as her real father who lived in a faraway land. When a little girl is 5 or 6, they're worried about dolls and they're worried about tea parties. They're not wishing for a different life. They're not wishing for a different father. I go into all of that, and I go into the last episode as well, a lot of your comments that you guys were giving me. So we go into all of Priscilla's heartbreak in that episode, chapter 3. I will link it here on the screen or somewhere in the description. But now it is time for chapter 4, and this one is called Fantasies of Elvis. And if you watched any of my Priscilla videos that I put out, you will know that Priscilla Presley has had a narrative out in the public domain since she released her own memoir. The first one she released in 1985 called Elvis and Me. And in that memoir, she talks about how, among other things, at age of 14, she was a complete whole innocent when she met him. And moreover, that she was never even really an Elvis Presley fan. And she really does kind of drive that point home in Elvis and Me, almost in a kind of suspicious way. It's a little weird because Elvis was so pervasive in the culture when he exploded onto the scene in 1956. I mean, he was known locally in the South before that, but it was like mid to late 1956 where he really burst on the national scene when he started making television appearances in New York. He went on Steve Allen show, he went on the Dorsey Brothers stage show, he went on the Ed Sullivan show at the end of 1956. So that's when he really was exploding. And everybody knew who he was. And he was divisive back then. The older generation were saying that, he was Elvis of Pelvis, that the way he danced, the way he sang, the way he moved, he was of the devil, and they just hated him and they wanted him banned. And there were radio stations that were banning him. But you had this whole younger generation, these boys and girls and all these teenagers who loved him, who loved the music, loved everything. And point being, everyone knew who Elvis was. But in her book, she makes a point to drive home to us, the reader, that she wasn't particularly an Elvis fan, that it was kind of like, she met this man named Cary Grant in Germany who was like, hey, do you want to meet him? And she was like, yeah, I guess so, sure. But this book is just unraveling that narrative that Priscilla has been perpetuating, saying her love of Elvis started way back, way before she ever met him. And that's what we're going to get into here in chapter 4. This is called Fantasies of Elvis. So let's get into it. By 1955, when she was 10, Priscilla had attended 6 schools from Connecticut to Maine to New Mexico to Texas and back. Despite her beauty, or perhaps because of it, she said that she never fit in. She started 5th grade at I.W. Podum School in Austin. It was in Austin that a sister, Michelle, was born. Carol Ann Hine, a close friend of Priscilla's from the 5th through the 8th grade, said that in most other ways, Priscilla was pretty much in the bracket of spoiled child. She pretty much had her way. Priscilla's beauty also served to bond mother and daughter. Anne shared beauty secrets with Priscilla. Anne Beaulieu exaggerated her own glamour, telling her daughter that she'd been a photographer's model in high school. This modeling career, however, escaped the notice of Anne's best friend Faye, her cousin Margaret, and her other classmates in New London. The once frustrated secretary was channeling her own thwarted ambitions into Priscilla. For her part, Priscilla's interests clearly did not lie in school. She admitted later that she was more interested in having fun. Priscilla had a few girlfriends at the start of 5th grade, including Donna Brooke and Linda Williams, both popular, outgoing girls, but still no close friends. She would later write in her memoir, Elvis and Me, as a rival, afraid I'd take their boyfriends away. Yet she was not remembered that way. No, she wasn't that type of person, suggested Christine. You weren't jealous of Priscilla. She was just Priscilla. And she wasn't snobby. She did gravitate toward boys, though. She would look back upon her entire childhood as detached. Priscilla was always discreet. She would later explain, there was always that sense of keeping a part of me distant. This was the key to Priscilla and would remain so. But because of all the secrecy in her family, Priscilla became secretive herself. This quality imbued her with a mystique she would carry into her Elvis years and beyond. Priscilla's aloofness could have been misconstrued as shyness. According to her classmate Christine, she was anything but shy. Christine considered Priscilla the class clown. Her excessive daintiness could also create the illusion that Priscilla was extremely modest, even prudish. On the contrary, she could be quite aggressive if she had a goal. When she wanted something, she went after it, remarked a Texas beau, Calvert White. Another boyfriend, Chuck Burns, saw her the same way. Split personality would be an underlying theme in her life and would make her exceedingly difficult to read. In the spring of 1956, when she watched a young Elvis Presley perform, and she found herself aroused. Elvis Presley communicated to Priscilla strength, virility, confidence, and a dark sensuality. And Priscilla responded. That March, Paul Beaulieu stood online at the PX to buy his daughter a copy of Elvis's first album, Elvis Presley, though it would later become part of the Priscilla Beaulieu myth and legend that she was not an Elvis Presley fan before she met him in Germany. The truth is that Priscilla was fixated on Elvis. A neighbor of the Beaulieus, Eddie Rutherford, remembered Priscilla's record player was going all the time. She absolutely loved his records. Eddie Rutherford and Anne Beaulieu arranged that year for their daughters, Pam and Priscilla, to meet. We immediately hit it off, Pam recalled. They shared a love of the outdoors, of horses, of fantasy, and of boys. In the 5th grade, Priscilla and Pam began playing a new fantasy game called Let's Pretend, or Imagine If. Priscilla always pretended that she was going to marry Elvis, Pam recalled, and I was going to marry Ricky Nelson. The games of Let's Pretend were part of the glue that cemented the friendship between Priscilla and Pam. We used to play Imagine If a lot. It was the first and probably the last time Priscilla Beaulieu allowed another woman access to her fantasies. That same year, or early the next, Priscilla joined an Elvis Presley fan club. He was close to Priscilla, yet far, far away. Okay, you guys, so that one was the end of chapter 4. Now, as we can see, Priscilla, a lifelong Elvis fan. Like most of us who encounter Elvis. I mean, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but he's definitely still one of the greatest cultural icons and singers of all time. That is undeniable. And Priscilla, like a lot of people, was enamored of him. So this chapter just really proves that.